What is going on, guys? If you are new to sales or you're just trying to train your sales reps, this is the exact video that you need to watch. Because when new sales reps come in, or if you're a business owner and you're new to closing deals, the easiest thing in the world is just to get caught up learning 1,000 random tactics. And in 2026, we have a trust recession. If you go on Instagram or TikTok, you're going to see all of these sales gurus just handling objections in these perfectly scripted clips. And let's be honest, over 90% of them aren't even real sales calls. Majority of it is just role play or just fake scenarios designed to look cool so that they can sell you their high ticket course. But let's be honest, if you're brand new to anything, here's going to be my advice. Take a step back and learn one skill at a time. And obviously it sounds cliche, but in sales, it is the truth. There's a handful of core skills that you need, but some skills matter way more than others, and you have to learn them in the right order. So in this video, if you are brand new, you're gonna see exactly what skills to learn and exactly in what order. And if you're also a seasoned rep, or if you're a business owner, you're gonna learn some new things as well. So let's get into the video.
Alrighty, let's get into it. So this is the sales skill development framework. So the fastest way to actually improve as a salesperson isn't by trying to fix everything at once, like I was saying. It's simply by identifying the highest single leverage skill that will actually move your calls the most forward and actually focusing on that relentlessly until it becomes second nature. So this approach is going to do three things. Number one, it's going to faster your skill acquisition. Number two, it's going to improve your sales call outcomes. And then lastly, it's going to give you clear tracking of progress. So the first thing that you want to do is actually identify the highest leverage skill. So at the start of every single week, you're going to briefly reach out and you're going to figure out which skill that you need to learn. Okay. So for example, there's a handful of skills that you're going to need to know. You're going to need to know, number one, which is the most important, lowering sales resistance. Number two is discovery and probing pain. Number three, handling the pitch. And then number four, objection handling. And in reality, not all skills are equal. The foundation of every single successful call is lowering sales resistance. And you can create a friendly, relaxed conversation from the start, which you'll naturally stay on the call longer, which gives you the opportunity to probe pain and actually handle objections later. So the first thing to focus on is mastering sales resistance or mastering lowering sales resistance. And once that becomes natural, move on to probing pain. And after that, move on to objection handling. Now, what is sales resistance? Sales resistance is basically the prospect's knee-jerk reaction to salespeople. Because in reality, sales is a comfort game. And the second people that think that they're being sold to, they just shut down. So, for example, think about a door-to-door salesman. Every single time a door-to-door guy goes to your house, you're just going to automatically say, oh no, I'm good, even if you don't know what he's offering. He could even be offering you $1 million. Before he even says that, you're just going to say, oh no, I'm good. Because you don't open up because you know they have an ulterior motive. It's the same thing here. You need to lower their sales resistance and just act like a friend. Now, here's a real world example of that. Let's say, for example, you were out and about. Let's say maybe you're in high school and you were smoking weed with a buddy, doing something that you weren't supposed to be doing. And, it was late at night, maybe it's midnight, and you come home with red eyes. Your dad, for example, is going to go ahead and ask you a bunch of questions. Hey kid, where were you? Why are your eyes all red? All this stuff. You know he has an ulterior motive as your dad or your mom or whoever. They're trying to figure out if you're doing something bad. Ultimately, if that happens, you're going to get in trouble. Okay? So you as the stoned kid, you're essentially just going to lie. You're going to say, oh no, it's allergies, nothing much. We were just playing basketball. You're going to lie because you know that your parent has an ulterior motive. So your sales resistance is high. On the contrary, the next day you go and talk to your buddy and they're like, oh, well, what were you doing so late yesterday with your buddy Evan? And he's like, oh yeah, man, dude, we got so high. We went to McDonald's, we watched Rick and Morty, whatever the fuck that stoners do, right? Because the reason why you open up is because your friend is your friend. They don't have an ulterior motive to get you in trouble. Sales resistance is the exact same thing. So if you don't know how to lower sales resistance, you're not going to make it to the end of the call, which means you can't learn other skills like objection handling and all that stuff. That's completely backwards. And you're trying to learn how to fight in round 4 when you can't even get through round 1. So when you lower sales resistance, prospects ultimately just relax and they open up. And they give you real information, and that leads into skill number 2, which is discovery. And discovery is where deals are actually won. And if you have a 10 out of 10 discovery, you don't get objections. And I'll say it again because most people don't understand this. A good discovery is way more important than being good at objection handling, because a good discovery prevents the objections from ever forming in the first place. And a lot of these objections aren't even real. Like, I need to think about it. I want to compare options. Send me more information. Most of the time, those are just protective responses because you didn't uncover the real issue or the real urgency or even just the real stakes. And you didn't get deep enough. So how do you actually go about running a real discovery? I'm going to go ahead and break that down for you. All right, so here is a generic discovery, and this can be applied to both setting calls and discovery calls, or discovery calls, whatever you call it, both setting and closing calls. The discovery is essentially the same. So let's go get into it. And in reality, at the top, what you want to think about it is this is just like an iceberg. At the top, you've got more surface level information. That's where most reps stop. But you're supposed to go a lot deeper. You want to get their desired outcome. As you can see, you want to get their tangible pain. You want to pull experience. You want to ask consequence questions and then figure out their alignment. So when you first start off, you're going to figure out, number 1, what prompted the call? And this is for setting calls, you're going to figure out, okay, what made them, whatever they filled out, what made them fill out the form, or for a closing call, what made them hop on the call? You get immediately into it. You don't bullshit discovery, ask them, oh, how's the weather out there? You just get into it, okay? Now, point number 2 is you're going to explore the surface level information. While as sales reps, we don't rely solely on this, we do need this information so that we can actually get into it. So you're going to explore tools and workflow. If you're B2B, which most of my people are, if you are selling, let's say marketing agency, you're a marketing agency, you're selling lead gen. Right now, what are you using right now for getting leads? Okay, how long have you been using that? What do you like about it? What's missing? How's it affecting your team's efficiency or ability to grow? So right off the bat, you need to get the surface level information. And then from here, you get into the desired outcome. Okay. Now, when it comes to actually solving your lead issue, what's the main thing that you're hoping to fix or improve? Or when it comes to actually generating qualified leads, what's the main thing that you're hoping to fix or improve? And then you want to ask, well, why is getting that fix important now? Why is getting that fix now important, not months from now? And right there, you're just testing them. You're figuring out, okay, well, why do they need to make a change? They're going to go ahead and essentially just sell themselves as far as why they need to make a change right now instead of waiting. This hopefully takes some pressure off them. And they're going to open up and say, hey, we really need to fix this because we're losing a lot of money. And then boom, you have more data to get into it. Now, from there, you're going to figure out an actual tangible problem. What's the biggest pain right now when it comes to, your current marketing solutions? And then from there, you get into it. They're going to open up and start talking. Because in reality, all sales is you are bridging the gap from where they are right now to where they want to be. And the further you can make this apart, the easier it is to insert your solution and sell it. But if you're not able to extract enough pain and here's them right now, here's where they want to be, it's very close, it becomes a lot harder to squeeze your solution in there. But if their goals seem a lot farther away and they seem like they're slipping every single day further away from their goal, it becomes way easier to sell. And that's essentially all you're doing in the discovery. Now, if a prospect talks and gives you a vague answer, you want to go ahead and give them, a little bit more clarity. Hey, most people I talk to are either dealing with, just financially unqualified leads, they're wasting lead spend, or, insert another common solution. Does any of that sound familiar? That's only if this answer they're giving you is extremely vague. And what you're doing is you're just getting them to open up and say, yeah, now that I think about it, we are dealing with a lot of financially unqualified leads. It's like, boom, now you have a lot more information. Now, what you want to do in number 5 is you're simply just pulling experiences. And this is what therapists do, because at the end of the day, if you're in sales, part of your job is kind of being a therapist. So what you want to do is you want to pull experience and actually get a story. For example, what have you noticed about your current process that's making this more painful than it should be? And what this is going to do is they're going to say, well, last Monday, I looked at my bank account, we're spending, $5,000 this month on ads, and it's only the 15th. And, we haven't closed that many deals. And then from there, you have an actual tangible story. And what this does is that makes them relive the pain. When people tell stories, storytelling is huge, both as marketers and sales reps, but also getting your prospects to tell a story opens them up and makes them more vulnerable. Which it's like, oh, wow, I guess, how did that make you feel? You're going to get deeper into the more of the personal and how it makes them feel. So now you're figuring out, okay, they have shit leads. Okay, that's surface level. Now their shit leads are costing them $5,000 this month. And now their shit leads is making this guy feel like shit himself. And that's when you get into the heart of it and you have a lot more data to actually sell these people. Now, consequence questions. Consequence questions are huge because essentially if you do this properly, you can avoid all the objections like I need to think about it or, I'll do this next month. Consequence questions are basically saying, hey, what happens if you don't do this right now? And you're just asking an obvious question and you want them to open up because every single time you don't want to tell the prospect, hey man, if you don't do this right now, you're not going to see results. You want the prospect to say it and you always want the information to come out of their mouth because people are more inclined to make a decision if they're changing internally versus externally. For example, what are you more likely to make a change in your life on? If your parents are screaming at you or if you internally know that you need to make a change? Obviously, the latter. So no external force can move this. This is why you ask obvious questions. For example, hey, let me ask you this. I guess what happens if things stay how they are for the next 3 to 6 months and you don't make any changes to how your insert pain. For example, if you're a marketing agency, let me ask you this. What happens if things stay how they are the next 3 to 6 months and you don't make any changes to how you're currently getting your leads? And then pause. You're going to let them reflect. And then you can use follow-ups. Hey, do you think it eventually slows things down or does it just stay annoying? Yada, yada. You're going to just probe them and go from there. Okay? Something that concerns you? Or is this kind of, hey, we'll deal with it when it breaks? Because if someone says, hey, this really concerns me, it's like, okay, well, I guess you're going to test them. What do you feel like you need to do today if everything makes sense, if this concerns you so much? They're going to say, oh, well, we really need to get this fixed today. It's like, okay, cool. Now you have more leverage. If they say, well, we kind of deal with it when it breaks, it's like, oh, well, I guess how is that mentality helping you? And then you can pre-handle and reframe their mindset. If they say, well, now that I think about it, it's not really working. And it's like, okay, well, I know that you mentioned that you as a business owner, you want to get to $100,000 a month and you're currently at $50,000 a month. Is it fair to say that, the way that we're kind of doing things or the way that we handle things in the past is what lead us to where we are right now? And they're going to say yes. It's like, okay, do you think getting to 6 figures a month, do you think we can kind of think that way? And they're going to say, oh, no, of course not. It's like, okay, well, do you think you need to change the way that you kind of act, the way that you think with going ahead and just waiting until things break to deal with it. Like, oh yeah, you're right. So that's kind of how you pre-handle this, because some people, they don't need you to go out and be a hero. You just need to fix their mindset, and this is what this question does. Okay, so that's the discovery. Now, the main rule with discovery is this: you never accept only surface level answers. Anytime a prospect gives you a vague answer, your job is simply just to get more precise, because the more precise you are, the more leverage you have in the pitch. So here are going to be super, super tactical things to actually go deeper. The first one is you're just going to go ahead and you're going to use a curious tone, and you're going to repeat their sentence back to them and ask them to qualify. You always want to act curious about what they're saying. For example, if you're selling marketing services and the prospect says, oh, our leads aren't qualified, you don't just accept that and move on. You go, okay, I guess, not qualified how? And you ask it in this curious tone, and people always want to feel understood. And when you act like it, they're going to start giving you the real details. They're going to say, oh, well, our offer is $20,000 and the people that are coming in are $10,000, yada, yada. It's like, boom, now you have more information. The second tactic is silence. And I do this a lot when I train new sales reps. And after they answer a question, all you're doing is you're just giving 2 seconds of silence. And look, it's going to feel extremely uncomfortable. And that's the point, because in 2026, there's no silence. People have phones, notifications, nonstop noise, and silence makes prospects uncomfortable, and they typically just fill it with more information. And when I train new sales reps, this one thing alone usually gives them about 20% more useful discovery, and that extra 20% makes closing way more easier. Because in reality, the more information that you have about the prospect, the more is better, because you're going to be able to close a lot easier when you have more leverage. Okay. Now, another thing that matters here is talk time. If you're recording your calls with Fathom or any other tool, you want to be able to see what your talk time is. In reality, you always want the prospect talking a lot more than you. There's I wouldn't say there's a perfect split. I'd say maybe 60-40 or 70-30. If they're talking more than you, that's better. But they can't just be talking about random stuff. This isn't them going on a tangent and talking about their daughter's softball game. They need to be talking about, whatever it is that you guys are talking. But more specifically, they got to be talking about their problems, their goals, and how it's affecting their personal life. Because when a prospect starts connecting the business problem to their real life, that's when you're actually in the money. If someone says something like, dude, my business is struggling right now and, it's affecting my marriage, it's like, that's where the real close happens. Not because you're excited that they're struggling, but it's simply because now you understand what the stakes are. And now it's actually real. And it sounds like they actually have urgency, and you can leverage that in your pitch. Okay. So very, very simple. Okay. The third skill that we're going to talk about is going to be the pitch or the demo, just depending on what you're actually selling. And in reality, a lot of people, they get this mixed up. Your discovery should be about 80% of your call. Your pitch, maybe 10% of your call. Because in reality, you want the call to be focused on solving issues, not focused on your product. And most sales reps and founders mess this up because they think, the pitch should be 30 minutes of explaining every single thing. And that is the fastest way to lose someone. Your pitch should be 5 minutes match. And your pitch should never just be a feature dump, because no one actually cares about what's in your product. They simply care how it solves their problem. So the pitch should be interactive, and it should connect directly back to their problem. So when you're going through the discovery, you should always have 2 to 3 problems that the prospect talked about, and you should always know that. You should always keep that in the back of your mind. Yes, you should be listening to what they're saying now, but if you're actually actively listening, you should know, okay, this person wants to fix the fact that they have unqualified leads and they're spending way too much on their leads. So, for example, you're going to go ahead and you're going to leverage that into the demo. So you're not going to talk 30 minutes about what you guys do. You're going to go ahead and say, hey, Let's say you're selling something where the prospect keeps saying, let's just go back into the marketing thing. Let's say, yeah, we're getting financially unqualified leads. They're saying, yeah, our service is $20,000, but these people only have $10,000 and they have bad credit and they can't afford it. A bad pitch, would you be going and saying, yeah, man, we run ads, we do funnels, we do landing pages, yada, yada. We do A and B testing, and you talk for 10 minutes. That's a feature dump, and they don't give a fuck, okay? You're going to go ahead and say, okay, Brad. Now, you told me that the biggest issue right now is that the leads are financially unqualified, correct? Okay, gotcha. So I guess how many of those are you getting per week? Okay, and the answer, and then you say, okay, how much is that? I think you said previously, you're missing about $20,000 in missed revenue. Is that correct? Okay, gotcha. So, what we're going to do for you specifically is we're going to implement our qualified lead filter. You can say whatever it is that you guys offer. And what this does is before someone even books or submits, they have to verify that they can afford the $20,000 and they have to meet the credit requirements. And then you're just going to connect it right back into the problem. So instead of you getting 30% of your leads being qualified, you're going to get to closer to 90% qualified. Do you feel like this is going to help you solve the main problem? They're going to say, yeah, man, of course. And boom. Maybe you could ask, hey, if we actually fix that, what do you think it's going to do to your revenue? Now they're going out and just selling themselves on it. And that's the pitch. It's short, it's specific, and it's interactive. And it's tied directly to their problems, okay? So it's very, very simple, 5 minutes max. You're just going to relate 2 to 3 features based on 2 to 3 of the problems. Make it interactive, don't make it boring, and just give them the actual numbers and the actual proof and how you guys can solve their issues. Now, once you do the demo, you don't just go straight into closing the prospect, okay? You are going to go ahead and you are going to talk about certainty, okay? So what you want to do is you never close a prospect ever until you know for a fact that they are a 10 out of 10 on the certainty scale. You're going to ask, hey, how do you feel about this? What stood out to you most? And then you're going to get into the certainty check. Say, hey, man, and every single time you get into the heart of the sales call, you want to be very, very lighthearted. This is where lowering sales resistance comes in again. You want to lower their sales resistance and just, kind of make a lighthearted joke. Hey, man, on a scale of 1 to 10, let's say 1 being you want to hang up the phone on John and never talk to me ever again. Or 10 being, you wish you started this, 6 months ago. Where do you feel like you fall? And what you're going to go from there is they're going to give you a number. Every single time they give you a number, you're going to ask, why that number? Why that number? You want to get them to explain. Even if they say they're a 10 out of 10, they say, man, I'm ready to get started. You always ask why. Hold your horses. You want to pull back, be neutral. Hold your horses. Why do you want to do that? And they're going to say, oh, well, this is amazing. It's perfect for what I need. I need to get this solved X, Y, and Z right now, yada, yada. And it's like, okay, cool. You're getting them to sell themselves. But if they say they're anything other than a 10, you guys, okay, even if they say they're a 9, okay, what makes you a 9? Maybe they say, oh, this is really awesome. This is something that would really work for me. I really like it. It's like, okay, gotcha. Well, I guess, why not a 10? Or, what would stop you from being a 10? And then this is where they're going to open up and they're going to say, oh, well, I guess it's missing X, Y, and Z. Or, yeah, man, I feel like I would just need this. And what you do from there, whether they're an 8, a 7, a 10, a 9, or sorry, if they're anything other than a 10, if they're a 9, 8, 7, 6, you simply just say, okay, gotcha. Well, what's stopping you from being a 10? And then once they say that, you isolate it. Okay, gotcha. Let's say, for example, a prospect says, well, you guys just don't have X, Y, and Z feature. That's why I'm only a 9. It's like, okay, gotcha. Well, aside from not having X, Y, and Z features, so you want to isolate the objection. Aside from you not having X, Y, and Z feature, is there any other reason why you wouldn't be a 10? And the reason you ask that is you're isolating the objection and making sure there's nothing else that's going to pop up. If they say, no, that's just it, you go ahead and attack it. If they say something else, you do the same thing. You isolate it. Okay, aside from you not having X, Y, and Z and 1, 2, 3, is there anything else that's holding you up from being a 10? And then from there, say, okay, well, Mr. Prospect, let's say I could include X, Y, and Z. Would that make you a 10? Oh, yeah, for sure. For sure. Okay, well, great thing is, we can do that. No extra charge for you. Would that be helpful for you? Yeah, definitely. Okay, boom. That's when you go. So you only go for the close until the prospect is a 10 out of 10. Even if they say, yeah, man, I'm a 10, and they don't sound like it, because body language is a huge thing. You just got to use common sense. If they say, yeah, man, I'm really a 10, and that's not their normal baseline, like they're normally not monotone, you just call them out. Hey, man, it doesn't sound like you're that excited. I guess what's kind of holding you back? Hey, man, doesn't sound like that. Doesn't sound like you're that excited to get started with us. What's going on? You just simply call them out, because you don't want to go for the close and then you get a bunch of objections at the end. So if they don't sound like they're a 10 out of 10, they say they are, just, make a joke out of it and just call them out. Very, very easy. You're not aggressive with them. You don't say, dude, that's not a 10. You just say, I mean, dude, it doesn't really sound like you're that excited. What's going on? And then they're going to open up to you. Okay? So very, very simple. Now, lastly, once you know for a fact they are ready to go, you pre-handle all objections, you had a 10 out of 10 discovery, everything lines up perfectly, you go into the transition phase. What I do specifically is I let the prospect just decide. Sometimes people like to do the assume the close thing. It works, no doubt. Assuming the close works. I used to assume the close, but what I do is I just let the prospect decide. Because at this place, if you know for a fact that you've done everything perfectly and you can solve their issues, they have no more objections, they should know where they want to go. It's going to be a no-brainer. So it's like, hey, so you're feeling good. There's no more questions. I guess, where do you want to go from here? I can walk you through onboarding and talk with you on the investment if that's helpful, but I'll just let you decide. And like I said, if you handled everything properly, all they're going to go ahead and do is say, yeah, man, let's hear about the investment. And then boom, you're going to talk about it. Or if you already talked about the investment, they already know the price. Okay, cool. You get them closed. Okay, so that's it. That's the order. This is extremely simple. In sales, you want to, number one, lower their sales resistance first so you can actually stay on the call. Number two, run a proper and deep discovery so you don't get objections. You're going to figure out where they are right now, where they want to be. Make that gap so big that your pitch is inevitable that they want it. Okay? Ensure that they know the consequences of if they don't do anything in the next 6 months, what happens. Ensure they're obviously aligned financially. Keep your pitch short, 2 to 3 minutes, 5 minutes, but you want to use 2 to 3 problems that they have and basically just relate it to what your product, platform, or software serves. Certainty transition. Ensure that they're 10 out of 10. Ask certainty questions so you surface and isolate all the objections without the pressure. And yeah, then go for the close. So this is essentially how I go about closing deals. I know I said this can work for both setting and closing. The discovery works perfect for setting. Obviously, for setting, your closing is going ahead and booking an appointment. So obviously, you're not going to go through a pitch and all that stuff. But yeah, that's essentially how we do it. If you guys have any questions, we'll see you on the next video.
Thank you for watching the video. And like I was saying, both a setting call and a closing call, they always have the same discovery. Number one, you figure out all the tangibles, all the surface level information. Then you figured out the desired outcome. From there, you figure out the pain pull the experience from them, get them to actually say a story about what's going on with their problems, and then from there, ask a consequence question and figure out ultimately, hey, if you don't do this in 6 months from now or 12 months from now, what's gonna happen? Have them talk about all the pain so that you don't get the objection that they wanna wait, 3 months from now to make a decision. And yeah, so if you like this video, like, comment, subscribe, and more videos coming soon. Thanks, guys.